Blood pooled around my shattered Oscar de la Renta heels. As my vision faded, my fiancé stood above me, my life's work clutched in his hand, his arm wrapped tightly around my supposed best friend. I died a naive fool. Then my eyes snapped open. 6 months earlier, same bed, different me. Pain. That is the first thing I remember about dying. Not the poetic, white light transition they sell you in movies, but the visceral, bone-crunching agony of a 3-story fall down the grand marble staircase of Le Meurice Hotel in Paris. It was supposed to be my night. The grand finale of the LVMH prize. For 3 agonizing years, I had poured my soul, my savings, and my literal blood into developing a revolutionary sustainable textile. A bioluminescent, biodegradable silk alternative I called Lumina. It was going to change the fashion industry forever. I had sketched the patterns, engineered the chemical compounds in a cramped Brooklyn garage, and sewed every single bead by hand until my fingers bled. Abel, my fiancé of 4 years, had been my rock, or so I thought. He was a charismatic fashion publicist who managed my schedules, my emails, and supposedly my heart. He had proposed to me just 3 weeks before the Paris exhibition, slipping a vintage Tiffany diamond onto my finger while whispering promises of a global empire built on my genius and his strategy. But that night in Paris, as the finalists were being announced, my name wasn't called. Serena Hastings' name was called. Serena, my college roommate from Central St. Martin's, a notorious socialite and trust fund baby whose only real talent was maxing out her father's black Amex on Birkin bags. She stepped onto the stage, bathed in applause, wearing my masterwork. The Lumina gown, the exact dress I had kept locked in my private studio, the one Abel had sworn he shipped securely to the judge's vault. I remember running up the grand staircase to the VIP suites, my lungs burning, the heavy brocade of my own dress dragging me down. I burst into Serena's dressing room, only to find Abel there. He wasn't consoling her. His hands were firmly planted on her waist, his lips against her neck. When I screamed, demanding answers, Abel didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just sighed, that condescending, exhausted sigh he always used when I was overreacting. "Grow up, Amelia," he had sneered, straightening his Tom Ford lapels. "You're a brilliant seamstress, but you have no name, no capital. Serena has the Hastings family backing. With her face and your designs, we secured $10 million in venture capital yesterday. We needed this." I lunged for the portfolio of my remaining designs sitting on the vanity. Serena shrieked. Abel grabbed my arm, twisting it with a viciousness I had never felt from him before, and shoved me backward out the door. My heel caught the edge of the top marble stair. I fell. I remember the sickening crack of my spine. I remember lying at the bottom of the stairs, paralyzed, choking on my own blood. Abel walked slowly down the steps, staring at my broken body. He didn't call for help. He just picked up the portfolio that had scattered near my hand, tucked it under his arm, and walked away with Serena. Then, darkness. A crushing, suffocating nothingness. Until the inhale. I sat bolt upright, gasping for air, as if I had been held underwater. My hands flew to my neck, my spine, my head. No blood, no pain. Just the soft, worn cotton of my pajamas and the familiar, damp smell of our Brooklyn loft. The morning sunlight filtered through the cheap blinds, casting harsh stripes across the hardwood floor. I scrambled out of bed, my knees weak, and stumbled to the bathroom mirror. Staring back at me was a face that hadn't yet been hollowed out by months of sleep deprivation. My hair was longer, my skin brighter. I gripped the edges of the sink, my knuckles turning white. I looked down at my left hand. The vintage Tiffany diamond was missing. I dashed back to the bedroom and snatched my phone off the nightstand. The 14th of October, 2025. 6 months. I had been thrown back exactly 6 months before the LVMH prize exhibition. 6 months before Abel would propose to me just to secure my legal binding to his management company. 6 months before he would hand my life's work over to a spoiled heiress. Morning, beautiful. The voice sent a literal shockwave of nausea through my digestive tract. I turned slowly. Abel was leaning against the bedroom door frame, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He wore his favorite gray sweatpants, his hair perfectly tousled, wearing that same easy, boyish smile that had blinded me for 4 years. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to grab the heavy brass lamp from the nightstand and cave his skull in. I wanted to tear his eyes out. I wanted to watch him bleed on the floor just like I had. But I am not the same Amelia who fell down those stairs. That Amelia was impulsive, emotional, and trusting. The Amelia who woke up today was dead inside, hollowed out by betrayal, and refilled with something cold, sharp, and terrifyingly patient. I forced my facial muscles to relax. I painted on a sleepy, adoring smile. "Morning," I whispered, my voice remarkably steady. I walked over and took the mug from his hand, leaning up to press a gentle kiss to his cheek. He smelled like his expensive cologne and a hint of mint toothpaste. It smelled like treason. "You were tossing and turning all night," Abel said, wrapping his free arm around my waist, pulling me close. "Dreaming about the collection?" "Something like that," I replied, taking a sip of the coffee. It was too sweet. He always made it too sweet because he never actually paid attention to how I liked it. I just never wanted to complain. "I was just thinking about the Lumina project. I think I've finally figured out the direction I want to take." His eyes lit up with that predatory gleam I had always mistaken for supportive enthusiasm. "Really? That's my girl. You focus on the art, let me handle the business. We're going to be rich, Cleva. I promise." I looked up into his lying, beautiful eyes, and for the first time in my life, I felt absolute, crystalline clarity. Yes, Abel, I thought. We are going to put on a show. But this time, I'm writing the script. And your ending is going to be far worse than mine. The first rule of setting a trap for a thief is making sure the bait looks irresistible. By the end of my first week back, my grief had fully metamorphosed into a cold, calculating machine. I didn't break up with Abel. I didn't change the locks. In fact, I played the role of the devoted, slightly overwhelmed genius better than I ever had in my past life. I let him cook dinner. I let him review my schedules. I let him think he was the puppet master. Meanwhile, I began constructing 2 completely separate realities. In my past life, the Lumina collection was a triumph of biochemistry. I had synthesized a protein structure similar to jellyfish, bioluminescence, and bonded it to a sustainable bamboo silk blend. It was flawless, but it was also incredibly unstable during the manufacturing process. It required a highly specific, proprietary chemical wash to set the proteins. Otherwise, any exposure to intense heat or ultraviolet light, like, say, high-voltage runway lighting, would cause the fabric's molecular structure to violently break down. In my previous life, I had meticulously guarded this chemical wash formula, ensuring every yard of fabric was treated before Abel even saw it. This time, I was going to leave the unwashed, highly volatile blueprints right where he could find them. I rented a secondary off-the-books storage unit in Queens under a fake LLC. That became my real sanctuary. There, in the dead of night, while Abel thought I was passed out from exhaustion, I began crafting the true collection. It was even better than before. Sleeker, more avant-garde, and mathematically perfect. But back at my primary studio in Brooklyn, the one Abel had keys to, I built the decoy. I spent hours sketching the most breathtaking ethereal gowns imaginable. I drafted the patterns, calculated the yardage, and compiled the technical tech packs. It was a masterpiece of illusion. I deliberately formulated the tension equations in the seams incorrectly. To a layman, or even a decent seamstress, the patterns looked brilliant. But if constructed exactly as written, the dresses would have the structural integrity of wet tissue paper. And the fabric? I synthesized a batch of the Lumina textile, but I completely omitted the stabilizing wash. I documented every step of the process in a sleek leather journal, leaving out the final, crucial stabilization step. 2 weeks into my rebirth, the bait was taken. I was at the cutting table in my Brooklyn studio, pretending to furiously erase a sketch, when the studio door chimed. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. The overwhelming scent of Le Labo Santal 33 announced her arrival before her Christian Louboutins clicked on the hardwood. Serena Hastings. "Amelia, darling," Serena cooed, sweeping into the room like she owned it. She was wearing a pristine white Chanel blazer, her blonde hair perfectly blown out. She looked exactly as she had the night she watched me die. My scissors hovered over the fabric, my fingers twitching with the sudden violent urge to plunge the shears directly into her throat. I inhaled sharply, grounding myself. Patience. "Serena," I gasped, dropping the pencil and giving her a warm, fake hug. What a surprise. "I haven't seen you since Alumni Week." "Abel told me I absolutely had to come down here," she said, her eyes already darting around my studio, assessing my work like a vulture scoping out a carcass. "He said you're working on something that's going to completely disrupt the Paris shows. You know I'm always looking for emerging talent to invest in." Invest in. That was her word for steel. It's highly confidential right now," I stammered, playing the anxious, protective artist. I nervously shuffled some papers over my sketchbook. "I'm still working out the technical kinks. It's a bioluminescent fabric. Self-illuminating." Serena's eyes widened, locking onto the exposed edge of a sketch. Genuine greed flashed across her perfectly contoured face. "Self-illuminating? Amelia, that's insane. Show me." "I really shouldn't. Abel said we need to keep it under tight wraps until the patent clears." "Oh, please," Serena scoffed, waving her diamond-clad hand dismissively. "Abel tells me everything. We had drinks just last night. He thinks you're a genius, but he worries you don't have the operational bandwidth to scale this. That's where my family's manufacturing contacts come in." Drinks last night. Abel had told me he was working late at a PR event for a client. The lie slipped off her tongue so easily, confirming everything I already knew. They were already colluding. The affair had already started. "Really?" I widened my eyes, forcing a look of desperate hope. "You think your father's factories could handle the synthesis? The chemical process is so delicate. I have it all documented in my master journal, but I've been so terrified of making a mistake." I casually gestured toward the heavy leather journal sitting unguarded on my desk. I saw her eyes lock onto it like a heat-seeking missile. "Amelia, honey, you need to stop stressing," Serena smiled, her tone dripping with condescending sweetness. She reached out and patted my cheek. "You're an artist. Leave the heavy lifting to the professionals. Abel and I will make sure you're taken care of." "Thank you, Serena," I whispered, looking down at the floor to hide the dark, venomous smile spreading across my lips. "I don't know what I'd do without you and Abel." That night, Abel came home exceptionally cheerful. He poured us glasses of a $200 Barolo paid for with my credit card, no doubt, and massaged my shoulders while I sat at the kitchen island. "Serena called me today," he said casually, pressing his thumbs into my muscles. "She said she dropped by your studio. She was blown away, Chloe. She thinks the Hastings Group might want to buy the exclusive manufacturing rights." "Buy the rights?" I feigned shock. "But Abel, it's my design. It's my name. And it will be, he soothed, kissing the top of my head. "But think about the logistics. You can't produce this on a massive scale. If we sell the structural patents to Serena, we get a massive payout up front. You get to be the creative director, free of the boring factory stuff. We can buy that house in the Hamptons you wanted." He was smooth. He was so incredibly smooth. In my past life, I had fought him on this for months, fiercely protecting my independence until he eventually realized he couldn't convince me, which was why he resorted to outright theft and murder. This time, I was going to hand him the gun and watch him point it at his own face. I let out a long, theatrical sigh, leaning back against his chest. "I don't know, Abel. The technical specs are so complex. If they mess up the weave, the fabric, it won't hold." Serena uses the best factories in Milan, Amelia. They won't mess it up. Just let me look at the tech packs. Let me take the journal and run some numbers with Serena's operations guy, just to see if it's viable. I stayed silent for a long moment, letting the tension build in the room. I could feel his heart beating faster against my back. He was desperate for it. Okay, I finally whispered, sounding defeated. The journal is on my desk. The USB with the pattern algorithms is in the top drawer. Just be careful with it. Abel, it's my whole life. I swear on my life, Amelia, Abel murmured, turning me around and kissing me deeply. I will protect this with everything I have. Oh, I know you will, Abel, I thought, staring into his deceitful, loving eyes. You're going to build your entire future on it, right up until the moment it disintegrates on the runway. The trap was officially set. Now, I just had to wait for them to steal it. 2 days later, my studio was ransacked. I received a frantic, breathless phone call from Abel while I was supposedly shopping for fabrics in Manhattan. He told me to come straight to the Brooklyn loft. When I arrived, I found the heavy oak door splintered off its hinges. Inside, it was a masterpiece of manufactured chaos. Mannequins were tipped over, bolts of cheap muslin were unspooled across the floor, and my desk drawers were violently yanked out. Abel was sitting on the edge of the cutting table, his face buried in his hands. He looked up at me, his eyes perfectly red-rimmed. Give the man an Oscar. Amelia, I am so sorry, he choked out, standing up and reaching for me. I let him pull me into his chest, burying my face in his shoulder to hide my absolute lack of tears. I forced my body to tremble. What happened? Abel, what did they take? It was a break-in. A targeted hit, he whispered, stroking my hair. They took the hard drives, your laptop, and... God, Amelia, I'm so sorry. They took the leather journal, the Lumina formulas. I let out a raw, guttural sob that I had been practicing in the mirror for 2 days. I collapsed to my knees, taking him down with me amidst the scattered pins and ruined sketches. No, Abel, that's everything. That's 3 years of my life. We have the LVMH preliminary judging in exactly 5 months. I can't start over. We'll fix this, he promised, his voice thick with fake emotion. I called the police. I called Serena too. She's putting her private security team on it. We will find who did this. Of course, Serena was already involved. They had orchestrated this perfectly. By stealing the physical journal and the USB drive with the flawed algorithms, they possessed what they believed was the master key to my genius. To them, I was just a hysterical, broken artist who had lost her map. They had no idea I was the one who drew the map, and I had deliberately led them straight off a cliff. For the next 4 months, I played the grieving ghost. I moped around the apartment. I cried into my tea. I let Abel graciously pay the rent, while I supposedly struggled to recreate my lost formulas from memory. He played the supportive fiancé flawlessly, all while taking clandestine trips to Milan. He claimed he was networking with PR clients. I knew he was meeting with Serena and her manufacturing team, frantically trying to produce the stolen Lumina collection in time for the Paris deadlines. While Abel and Serena were busy weaving their own destruction, I practically moved into my secret Queen's storage unit. I reached out to Beatrice Dupont, an old, semi-retired textile maestro I had met during a study abroad program in Lyon. Beatrice despised the corporate greed of modern fashion houses and held a fierce, maternal affection for independent artists. I flew to France in secret over a weekend. Abel thought I was at a yoga retreat. I showed Beatrice my true formulas, the stabilized bioluminescent proteins, the reinforced structural seams, the flawless mathematical draping. Beatrice wept when she saw the glowing fabric in the dark of her atelier. "It is witchcraft, ma chérie," she had whispered, running her wrinkled hands over the glowing, ethereal silk. "And what of your fiancé, the charming PR boy?" "He thinks I am broken," I replied coldly. "I need you to help me manufacture the real collection, Beatrice. I need it completely off the grid, and I need a spot on the LVMH runway." Beatrice smiled, a wicked, knowing glint in her eye. Bernard Arnault owes me a favor from 1,998. Leave the runway to me. You just build your armor. Back in New York, the timeline accelerated. 2 weeks before Paris, the hammer finally dropped. Abel came home early, flanked by 2 imposing men in expensive suits. He didn't offer a warm smile or a glass of wine. He tossed a thick legal document onto the kitchen island. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice small and wavering. "It's over, Amelia," Abel said, his voice stripped of all the fake affection he had weaponized for years. He sounded bored, clinical. The relationship, the business arrangement, all of it. I stared at him, letting my eyes fill with authentic, unblinkable focus. "You're leaving me? Now? Right before the Paris trip?"
"There is no Paris trip for you," he sneered, adjusting his Rolex. "Serena Hastings is debuting her new label, Aura, next week at the LVMH Prize. It's a bioluminescent textile line."
Revolutionary stuff. I am her new managing partner. And frankly, your erratic behavior since the break-in is bad for my brand.
"She stole it!" I screamed, finally letting a fraction of my real rage slip through. I pointed a trembling finger at him. "You gave it to her. You staged the break-in."
"Prove it," Abel countered, stepping closer, towering over me just like he had in my past life. But this time, I wasn't backing away toward a marble staircase. I stood my ground. "You have no patents, Amelia. No digital footprint. No physical journal. The Hastings Group filed the patents 3 months ago. If you breathe a word of this to the press, Serena's lawyers will bury you so deep you won't even be able to sew buttons at a dry cleaner's." He turned on his heel, signaling the suits to grab his pre-packed designer luggage from the hallway. "Consider the loft yours for the rest of the month. Goodbye, Amelia." When the door clicked shut behind him, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I walked over to the kitchen island, poured myself a glass of that $200 Barolo he had left behind, and toasted the empty room. Paris in late October is a city woven from magic and ruthless ambition. The grand ballroom of Le Meurice Hotel was overflowing with the elite of the global fashion syndicate. Anna Wintour was seated in the front row, her signature sunglasses reflecting the harsh runway strobes. Buyers from Bergdorf Goodman and Saks Fifth Avenue murmured with bated breath. The rumor mill had been churning for weeks about Serena Hastings' miraculous new textile. I was standing in the shadows of the secondary backstage wing, wearing a simple black trench coat, entirely unnoticed by the panicked, headset-wearing production assistants. Thanks to Beatrice's quiet influence, my name had been secretly added to the final exhibition roster under a pseudonym, Project Phoenix. The lights dimmed. The heavy bass of a techno track thumped through the floorboards. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "presenting the premiere collection of Aura by Serena Hastings." Serena confidently strutted out from behind the velvet curtains, leading her models. She was wearing the crown jewel of the stolen collection, the Lumina Grand Gown. It was, for a fleeting 30 seconds, a visual triumph. The lights in the ballroom cut out completely, and a collective gasp echoed through the crowd as Serena and her models began to glow. A breathtaking, deep, oceanic blue radiated from the fabric. It was alien. It was beautiful. Abel was standing near the photographer's pit, his face flushed with triumph, his chest puffed out like a conquering emperor. But I knew the chemistry. I knew exactly what was about to happen. The runway technicians, acting on the standard cues for a finale, suddenly blasted the models with high-voltage, ultraviolet spotlights to enhance the photographic contrast. 3, 2, 1. The unstabilized proteins in Serena's gown reacted instantly to the intense UV radiation and the heat of the bulbs. The chemical breakdown wasn't gradual, it was violently exponential. First, the deep blue glow flickered, turning a sickly, radioactive yellow. Serena paused at the end of the runway, striking a pose for Vogue, completely unaware that the structural seams of her dress, the ones I had mathematically sabotaged, were actively dissolving. A loud, sickening RIP echoed over the music. The left shoulder of Serena's gown simply gave way, the fabric turning into a brittle, powdery sludge. Serena shrieked, grabbing her chest as the bodice began to literally melt away from her body. Panic erupted. Down the runway, the other models began screaming as their garments rapidly disintegrated. The highly volatile bamboo silk blend, lacking my stabilizing wash, began shrinking and tearing under the intense heat. It looked like the clothes were returning to dust right before the eyes of the fashion elite. "Turn off the lights! Turn them off!" Abel was screaming at the tech booth, scrambling onto the runway with his suit jacket off, trying to cover a frantically sobbing Serena, who was now standing in front of Anna Wintour in nothing but melting, sticky yellow rags and her La Perla undergarments. The flashing cameras of the paparazzi went into overdrive. This wasn't a fashion show anymore. It was a historic, career-ending catastrophe. "What is happening?" a buyer from Neiman Marcus shouted, backing away from the runway as a model frantically tried to peel the dissolving fabric off her arms. "It's a complete structural failure." A calm, authoritative voice echoed through the chaotic ballroom. The massive digital screens above the runway suddenly flickered to life. The Aura logo vanished. In its place, giant high-definition videos began to play. It was security footage. Crystal clear footage from my Brooklyn studio, secretly recorded by hidden cameras I had installed weeks before the break-in. The entire ballroom fell dead silent. The only sound was the audio from the video. "Just let me look at the tech packs. Let me take the journal and run some numbers with Serena's operations guy." Abel's voice echoed through Le Maurice. The video cut to Serena in my studio. "Oh, please. Abel tells me everything. You're an artist. Leave the heavy lifting to the professionals." Abel, standing on the runway clutching a half-naked Serena, turned ghost white. He looked like he was going to vomit. As you can see, I spoke into a wireless microphone, stepping out from the shadows of the backstage curtain. The spotlights immediately swiveled to me. I dropped my black trench coat to the floor. I was wearing the true Lumina masterpiece. It didn't just glow, it pulsed with a steady, unbreakable, starlight silver luminescence. The cut was impossibly sharp, the drape defying gravity. Under the blazing UV lights, it didn't melt. It only grew brighter, illuminating the entire room with my undeniable victory. Serena Hastings and Abel Carter did not invent this textile, I announced to the captivated, horrifyingly silent audience. I walked slowly down the runway, my heels clicking sharply against the floor. I stepped right over a pile of Serena's melted fabric. They stole a preliminary, unstable prototype. They stole my flawed decoy. My name is Amelia Bennett, and this is the real Lumina. I stopped right in front of Abel and Serena. Serena was weeping uncontrollably, her makeup smeared across her face, humiliated in front of everyone she had ever tried to impress. Abel stared up at me, his eyes wide with absolute terror and realization. He finally understood. I hadn't been oblivious. I had been orchestrating his public execution for 6 months. "You," Abel breathed, taking a step backward, his hands trembling. "You planned this. You set us up." "I grew up, Abel," I smiled, looking down at him with nothing but pure, unadulterated pity. "Just like you told me to." By midnight, the Hastings brand was dead in the water. Serena was rushed out of the hotel under a blanket, facing massive lawsuits from the investors she had defrauded. Abel was fired by his PR firm before he even made it to Charles de Gaulle Airport, blacklisted from the industry forever, facing criminal charges for corporate espionage. And me? I walked out of Lemurus with 3 exclusive manufacturing offers, absolute ownership of my patents, and my soul entirely intact. I didn't just survive the fall this time. I owned the damn staircase. Did this tale of runway revenge and karmic justice leave you breathless? Don't let the story end here. Smash that like button, share this video with your fellow drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping, real-life betrayal stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a twist. What would you have done in Amelia's expensive shoes? Let us know in the comments below.